Homeschool How To. I'm Cheryl, and I left the life of classrooms and cubicles for home educating in the countryside. But I have no idea how to homeschool, so I interview the people who do. Join me on my quest to learn all the ways there is to homeschool. Welcome, and with us today I have Gabriella from RellaBBooks. Gabriella, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so how did you get into the homeschooling space?
So technically, I'm dipping my foot in. I would consider myself a hybrid homeschooler. And the reason that I say that is because right now my daughter goes to school 3 days a week, and then the other 2 days a week, she actually stays home with me. And during those 2 days, we still do reading, math, science, and we also do a lot of extracurriculars. I have some reasons why I'm doing it this way, but ultimately my goal is to have her fully homeschooled in second grade.
And so what even makes you want to homeschool? There's so many reasons that people have from all different, from medical to, what they're learning. What are your reasons?
So some of the reasons that I want to homeschool is protection, honestly, protection from different social influences. Another reason that I want to homeschool is just because I really want to have a lot of flexibility when it comes to what she's learning and where she gets to learn it. I have flight attendant benefits, so we can travel a lot and very easily. And I would love to be able to travel around the world and teach her not only about different places in their history, but also show her different cultures, languages actually in those places.
So I've had world schoolers on the podcast before, and that's a technical term that they call themselves. We are world schooling. One woman in particular, they kind of just look for the cheapest flight that they can get where, they can get some sort of housing situation in that community. And she was like on a raft in, let's say like the Amazon or something. I'm gonna have to look back at that episode, but it was amazing. And they just stay there for 6 months or a year and really submerge themselves in the culture. So that really is cool. Where has been the awesomest place that you've visited so far?
Oh, this is a really hard question. I think the most memorable place would probably be Puerto Rico. The most exotic place would probably be China. And the place that I would probably love to go back would be Japan.
Hey, well, you got a bucket list then. That's so cool. And yeah, what better way to learn than actually being there, learning, than reading about it in a book?
Yes, and even the journey to get there is such a great lesson to have. I don't know if I'd be able to stay for 6 months to a year, but I plan to be able to take 3 or 4 trips a year for about 4 weeks, and I'm going to have her plan an itinerary, figure out how to get there with the flights, budget the trip, figure out how much money we need to spend and what we're going to be able to do while we're getting there. I'm so excited, but right now she's only 4, so we travel a lot, but not for very long.
Yeah, so there's a little time. But yes, all of that, all of those life skills. Like my kids are young too. I have a 6 and a 2-year-old, and just my son learning how to make eggs in the morning and him being the one that, he makes the eggs, that's his job. And I cut the bread, but he'll toast it up. And it's like these real world, and he'll even go to the chicken coop to get the eggs. So it's like he's really seeing like this full circle kind of thing happening going on where he goes to feed the chickens, take care of the coop, and then he's collecting the eggs and making the eggs with it. It's really an awesome way to live because we're so disconnected from all of that when we're in the school. Have you homeschooled, like been homeschooled yourself, or did you go to traditional school?
No, I was never homeschooled. I went to school on military bases and moved a little bit, and then I was just in like regular school after that. Oh, I
So you
did
must have.
online schooling at home in addition to public school, so I don't know if that counts.
Oh, that's interesting. What made you do that?
I wanted to get out of school. I wanted to be out as fast as possible. So I was like, let me just do all of my credits online. And I could have graduated early, but my mom didn't let me because she didn't want me to be in the real world or with older kids.
That's understandable. What did you not like about school yourself?
Because I lived in Japan for 3 years, the school system there was amazing. The library was like really therapeutic, so you could do Zen gardening there. They had different like classes like robotics. It wasn't just like art or like anything like that. They had cultural classes as well. So we had a regular math class where we're just learning different principles of math, but then we also had like a Japanese language class, a Japanese math class. It was very interesting. And it was more child-led. And then I moved to the States, to Nevada, and it was just not the same. Like even the gifted and talented programs, the way they ran the schools, the way they taught, it just never compared to Japan. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It wasn't fun. And they were really limiting here. So I already knew how to write in cursive. When I moved out here, I was in third grade, and they were like, no, you can't write in cursive because we haven't taught that yet. So I was like, oh, okay.
So
I
your
can't do
first
things.
3 years were in Japan of real seeing this is what school is supposed to be. And then you come to the States in third grade and they're kind of like, no, was it more geared towards the test here in the state at that time?
Um, yes, I feel like they mainly teach to the test. But even then, they didn't want kids to be too far ahead of each other. So they were like really limiting like where you could go and what you could do.
That makes a lot of sense, especially when like I try to talk about people understanding this concept of the fact that we're supposed to all learn the same things because we're all 8 years old in the same way and then be tested on it. But we all have different backgrounds. We all have different like levels that our brain is making connections, and we all have different even background experiences as far as who could get to bed early the night before, or, who gets nourished enough at home. So things just come easier to some. And we're all just supposed to be like learning it from this textbook and then graded on it. And then how is that supposed to make you feel when you don't, get as high of a grade as the other 8-year-olds? It really is a terrible way. Did they have testing in Japan that you remember?
I know that they did testing, but I don't remember it ever being like a super stressful thing. I know we would do a lot of quick tests. So, you do your multiplication tests and you have to do it like as quickly as possible. But it wasn't like they would grade it and we would go over like which ones we got wrong or not. But it wasn't like a punitive thing. It was a learning thing. Like, okay, let's see how far you can get. Can you finish the sheet? Or maybe you couldn't finish the sheet. Maybe you had to skip some. Maybe certain numbers tripped you up more than others. And so it was a way to figure out where you were struggling the most. Maybe it was speed, maybe it was certain numbers, and then you could learn from that. And then you could go into different groups of people that are at your like learning level and then get better help.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's very different than what we have now. That's so interesting. So, okay, so did you finish out your public school education in the States, like in Nevada?
Yes, I did.
And you wanted to get out as quickly as possible. What did you end up going to college for?
For education.
That's
Yeah,
ironic. Were
I
you trying to
know.
change the system?
I did. I really wanted to. And I even worked for the school district for 3 years after college. And I started off in a elementary school and then I went to the technology department because I love technology. I've always loved computers. But just so many things that I learned about the school district and the way they work. It was like, I can't do this. Let me just go like travel the world and see things because you guys are doing things backwards. Like you don't teach a lot of real life lessons. And then when I found out that they were using third grade scoring for like reading and literacy and everything to correlate to how many prisoners they would have in the future, I was like, what? There should not be a correlation there. And if there is, there should be a lot of heavy intervention around that time. So I was just heartbroken learning different things behind the scenes in the school districts, and I left.
I have heard about that study. Yeah. So break that down for us. What are they correlating now?
So they use third grade reading scores for their standardized testing, and they normally try to use those number correlations to the amount of prisoners that they'll have to house years later. And
So,
it's
okay. So if I take all the third graders in the United States and say 50% of them, say a million of them fail, I have to think there's going to be a million people in prison in 20 years from now.
Yes, that's kind of like a rough correlation of how they have it. And I mean, it's not directly like, oh, if your child fails this, then they're going to be in prison. But it is more likely because if they're not passing these reading tests and everything, it's more likely that they're not going to be able to read when they're taking tests to get jobs or employment and other things. And if you can't get that employment, where do you normally turn to? Crime or opportunistic things. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Instead of saying, okay, what are we doing as a system that isn't allowing these children to read? And I really do think pushing the reading early is the detriment. If your kid's not ready, my son's 6, he's not reading fully on his own yet. And I really try hard to not push him to learn it on his own because that's what he's supposed to do at 6 years old. It's like, all right, if your brain's just not there yet, there are so many other things that you are good at. I know, there's nothing developmentally wrong, or, we can look at dyslexia and stuff down the line if it really never comes naturally to you. But pushing it and pushing it is just going to make the kids hate story and reading and being creative. Thought, just sitting there and looking at a book without like getting nervous because they're so used to screen changes from all of the social media and video game, TV. So yeah, what are we doing as a society to fix that? Instead of testing them on it, maybe spend more time reading with them in school. I remember like a teacher every now and again would take out a book and read it to us. I don't remember that being typical every day. I do remember like in 6th grade, we had a reading class, but I remember wanting to read a Goosebumps book and they wouldn't let me. So it's like, okay, just because the content might not be what you want, but this is reading class. I'm reading. I'm reading. That's the point. I'm reading something that interests me, and they're just kiboshing it and telling me to go read something more, maybe more literature based, but all that did was make me sit there and stare at a book and not read. I just looked at the clock till, the 39 minutes was up for the class.
Yes, I remember that. And that's a big reason of why I started writing children's books and creating content that is based around reading, because sometimes parents don't have time to read, or sometimes kids want to read the same story over and over. So I created a YouTube channel where I read to kids, a podcast where I read to kids, and I also create children's books that are silly, and some of them are like science-based, because I don't think that you should discount any form of reading. Audiobooks are still reading. Watching someone read to you on the TV, like Reading Rainbow or my YouTube channel, Reading with RellaB, is still reading. And you still get those moments of being able to know, like, okay, what's going to happen next, and using your comprehension skills and things like that. So, I think it's more important to have our kids really interested in reading, because the formality of it can come later. There's people that have to read in different ways because of disabilities. Like if you have to use a screen reader, that doesn't mean you're not reading. If you have to use an audiobook instead of a book, that does not mean you are not reading.
I use audiobooks for everything these days. It's like when you're a mom, you just gotta, you don't have extra hands to hold the book or to sit there without falling asleep. So tell us a little bit about, like, all right, I wrote one children's book, the one behind me. That was a lot of work. And you don't really make a lot of money. I didn't make anything because from what I put in it. So you've written multiple books. Like, tell us, where did this start for you? You realized the education system is crap. You started traveling the world. What made you say, I want to write children's books?
Well, see, nobody told me what you just told me before. I was like, we're not going to make any money doing this. So like, don't do it. But I've always wanted to write books. I'm working on a novel as well, but I started with children's books because I love children's books. I love some of the different books that I remember when I was little was like Junie B. Jones and the Boxcar series. Yes. Those
the Boxcar children.
Yes, so I just wanted to have a part of that. And I'm like, maybe some kids will be so drawn to my books that they're like, I remember that when I was younger. So it's mainly about getting kids to think about different situations and just outside of the box. So I started my children's books and I'm sticking with it as far as like trying to get them out into the world and everything. But it's not just about the books, it's also about getting kids to love reading. So that's why I wanted to have content with it as well. And I'm really excited because I'm working on a book that's about a little like fantasy creature that lives in a homeschool, and the kids actually teach the creature what they know, but in a tricky way because they hate learning. So if they see a workbook come out, they're hiding. They are not going to like do homework. They're not going to watch a science presentation or anything like that. But the kids show him different things in a very sneaky way that then they realize they can apply later, and that learning is not so bad. And I'm very excited about that.
That sounds amazing. Because yes, I mean, that's all. Even my son will say, when do we get to stop doing homeschool? How old do I have to be? And I'm like, no, that's not what it's about. It's like, you should always want to learn and be like thirsty for knowledge. And I know those are like coined terms that to me always sounded corny. But now that I'm homeschooling him, I'm excited to learn the stuff that I never learned in this way. So it really is I think that's the most challenging part, is like, how do you get them excited about it? Because their world is so small at that point. Like they don't realize, I didn't realize there was this whole like nature outside of us. And I would always think about like, oh, teach them about nature. Like, well, I don't want to teach them about bugs. But now that I'm like doing a garden and you see, for example, like a pill bug. And I think I looked it up one day, or maybe it was just in one of the books we were reading. And it was like, these things are made of like steel. You can't, when they like round themselves to as a defense mechanism, you can't get through the bug. It's crazy. So I'm like, that's so interesting. How is he not? So I'm really trying to find ways to get him excited about that. But to him, he's like, okay, because he doesn't know that that's the only bug really that happens to, or and it's finding a way to get them excited. But I love that idea. What was your first book that you wrote?
So the first book I wrote was Mama, I Got a Dollar, because I love financial literacy. I think it's so important that people understand the way their money works and debt. So
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a children's book about it, just short, sweet, and simple, but just has like a touch on all of the basics, saving, debt, spending your money, where you can save your money, because it's important to start talking about that early.
You are so true. My son has like a little checkbook right now that he has my husband's old checkbook, so he's marking down like all the monies that he's got and like the savings account at the bank and in his piggy bank, and every time he spends a little bit, he minuses whatever that is, and then if he finds, I think he just found like a couple like silver dollars, so he's adding that back in, and it really is that's huge right there. And gosh, you can get into that for days, going into how to save and like how interest works and taxes and oh my gosh, stuff they never taught us in school.
Yes, yes. Even just being able to take maybe $10 and invest it for them and show them the way that it can grow. My daughter's 4, so she doesn't really get it, but I'm like, what do you really like? You like Disney? Okay, we can buy a portion of Disney. This little teeny tiny 0.0001% is yours, and we can watch it grow. There's just so much that you can learn with money, and obviously, I mean, word problems, like regular math, investing, all of that stuff is just so necessary. And I feel like money is a fun way to do it, because if they want toys or they want to do their chores and get more money, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and they really don't teach us much about investing in school. And you got to think that's probably by design. They don't want the commoners to invest well, because somebody's got to be like, the workers that just are kind of a slave to the system, like we're just here to grind away, and 50% of our income goes to taxes, which that isn't even, income tax isn't even legal, but they don't teach you that either. But yeah, we're taxed for a sales tax, corporate tax. Every time you buy something, it's taxed. When you sell it, it's taxed. It was taxed before it got to the store that you took it from, and then they're taxing your income, they're taxing your property, they're taxing you for school. It's insanity. But they don't want
It
us to
is.
know about all that, because if we all got wise to it, we'd probably stop paying it or throw tea in the harbor, and then
Right.
they'd really have to do something.
Exactly. I didn't even add taxes actually in the book. I feel bad about that now.
Well, hey, that's your sequel.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's next for you? You said that you have a podcast too. So are you reading to the kids on the podcast? What kind of books? Your own?
So I do read my own, but on the podcast, we have the kids sit down and listen. And what we do is we do a riddle to find out what we're going to be reading about. And then we invite an author, and an author comes and reads us their story. And we mix in some fun little sound effects. And then we talk about the lessons in the story. And then we do a shout out at the end of it. I was doing a little like stretch and movement. So in some of the older episodes, I was doing like interactive, like imagination segment, or a stretch where they're like wiggling around and moving as well. But I'm testing it without the movement part, because I know for younger kids, sometimes it can be a little bit harder to take audio only instructions when they can't see you. So I'm keeping that on YouTube for right now.
Wow. So you're writing the books, you've got the podcast, you're doing a YouTube channel, and being a mom,
Yes.
and you're still doing the flight attendant work.
Oh no, no, I have not flown. for a long time.
Okay.
So we just have a really like unique situation right now where I can still be employed, but I don't have to fly and I get the benefits.
Wow. Yeah, so you are busy though.
Yes.
That's amazing. All right, what's next that you're working on?
So, besides the homeschooling book, I am working on a couple different books, and I'm working on like a book club where little readers can come and give me input on the books before they're done. So they can read the manuscript, they can see the sketches, the covers, the development of it, and then they can be put on a special page. I don't know if I'm going to be calling this page a special thanks page or if I'm going to be calling it a little editor's page, and then all of their little credits are going to go in there. Because I really think it's important to like get kids input because this is who I'm trying to write for, and I think it'll just be fun for them. It's a reading project for them. Maybe I'll make a mistake and they can catch the mistake, and I'll do like a giveaway if they can find so many mistakes in the thing. So I'm trying to make a little community around the development of my books. I love it, and I think some of the stories are really cute. And the other thing that I'm really trying to work on, which this will be like a 2026 or 2027 thing, is doing a movie that's a Reading with RellaB movie. And it's talking about the different parts of speech in English in reading. So I have the screenplay done, but I've never done a screenplay. So
That's amazing. Wow. I thought of the one book and I'm like, all right, that was a lot of work. I'm
it
out.
is.
You think the writing of the book is actually like the bulk of it, but it's not. Like the writing and rhyming it and stuff, that was like the easy fun part. And then it was the editing and even working with the illustrator. I didn't illustrate it myself. So it was like, okay, here's what she envisioned for each page. I'm like, that's not what I envisioned. And, I mean, I self-published, so I could tell her, no, I'm the one paying you. So like, you got to change it to this, change it to that, change it to that. And then it was like, okay, these didn't fit on the page right. Her illustrations didn't fit with where I had, my text is too big. So then I'm changing the font and the size, but now it's not equal to the other pages and where are you going to put it? And that background clashes. Like, oh my God. And then
Yeah.
doing the ISBN numbers and making sure, there's one for a Kindle and one for a paperback and one for a hardcover. And where are you distributing it all to? I was like, at the end of it, I was like, it's out. I'm done. No, there's got to be an easier way. I loved writing. It was a great experience. Maybe someday I'll do it again, but I forgot even how the whole process. I should have written it down at the time. Like, this is what I'm doing next. Maybe that's an idea for you. Since you're a pro at it now, you could.
Yes, I do. I'm working on my system still, and it's exhausting, like you said. That's why I'm trying to work on so many at one time, because even giving feedback to illustrators is a really big mental process, and it helps with your communication. And that's why I think that involving kids in that process, they can communicate their ideas and their thoughts, because they're like, this arm looks funny. Like, so how should it be? Like, tell me how you envision the arm going. And that alone, like being able to communicate your thoughts in a way that somebody else can understand them and then translate it into a drawing on a piece of paper, like,
Yeah.
ugh, exhausting.
It is. You're so right. I remember some of those mornings at 5 a.m. looking at it like, oh God, this isn't what I pictured, but I don't know how to fix it.
Yeah.
So kudos to you for doing this multiple times. It must get a little easier. Maybe you get a flow going.
Yes.
That's awesome. I'm going to link all your books in the description of this podcast so people can check them out. And then if you would like to put your contact info for the best way for them to find you on social media, if you want to relay that off right now, feel free, but I'll also put it there.
Yes, of course. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at RellaBBooks on any social media and RellaBBooks.com. And that's RellaBBooks.com. So lots of doubles.
I love it. And yeah, kudos to you too, even just having all the social media accounts, because that was the other thing. It was like, okay, now you need a website for the book. Well, can't I just use my podcast website? Nope, you're an author now. You got to have your own website. And oh, well, you should have, a page for, Instagram for this and Facebook. And woo, that's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it
But
is.
good for you. And what, like, you're you're teaching your daughter all of this stuff as she gets older and watches this process, and being a business owner, an entrepreneur, and how you do your finances with it, and the marketing and the outreach and the organization of it all. They're all just fantastic. And just the writing itself. Fantastic tips for her to learn all along the way. I love that idea. As people ask me, like, how could I work and homeschool? Things like this, like running your own business, writing books, even though they don't really make a lot of money. I'm sure at some point you get to a place where they do, you get a little bit more well-known, and, you know, people like your first book, so they grab your second, third, and fourth. But yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you, Cheryl. This was great. I really appreciate it.